Over 100 years of serving this country. Barbados like a power company. From Christchurch to St. Lucie. Barbados like a power company. You can count on us.
Welcome to an Energy Talk special for the Barbados Light and Power Company. Our special guest for this edition is Managing Director Roger Blackman. So Roger, thank you so much for speaking with us. I know this is going to be a fantastic interview.
Thank you, Shane. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you.
Okay. Roger, we know that electricity is such a valuable resource, but sometimes we take it for granted. And because we use it so often, when it goes, sometimes we get a bit upset or frustrated. There was an island-wide outage last month. What was the cause of it, and how long did it take to restore power?
We appreciate how inconvenient it is for customers when outages occur, no matter how short or long they are. On this particular occasion with the island-wide outage that we experienced a few weeks ago, it was initiated by a fault that occurred on one of our generator breakers at Spring Garden, main power plant. At the time, our maintenance crews were conducting tests on the particular breaker, and while conducting those tests, there was a flashover. And that initiated our protection systems, which cleared the fault in the immediate vicinity. So the engines that were around that plant tripped off immediately, and restoration, recovery would have started. However, at the time of day when that fault occurred, which was around close to midday, we had quite a lot of renewable customers on the grid at the time. And even though our protection systems worked as designed to clear the fault, and it did so safely, and there was no injury to the personnel or to adjacent equipment, or renewable customer systems that were on the grid, they tripped off at the time of the fault, and that created a large overload which our system was unable to balance. And so with all of that customer renewable energy system coming off of the grid at the time of the fault, we had a cascading event and ultimately a blackout. What we're doing now is investigating why that would have occurred the way it did, because in our grid code and our specifications for those customer-owned systems, we identify what we refer to as voltage ride-through settings that should have resulted in those riding through the fault and staying on rather than tripping off. And so we're currently investigating that, which may require us to do some checks on customer systems. But it also brings into sharp focus the need for batteries over the long term, because as renewables grow on the network, and as we know, solar and wind are intermittent resources, we will need equipment like batteries and other equipment to create the stability that's required when those systems swing up and down onto the network.
Okay. There is, I think I speak for all Barbadians when I ask this question. We hear about monkeys when we talk about blackouts. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, well, animals certainly do cause outages from time to time, not just on our network, but on networks across the world. But in addition to animals, there are kites, as we're well aware of. There are trees and tree branches or any debris that might be blown onto power lines at any point in time. What normally happens when those events occur, and like I say, those happen from time to time on the network, they're unavoidable, is that the protection systems that are installed on the grid isolate those faults very quickly so that the amount of customers that are affected are minimized. On occasion, depending on where that fault occurs or the time of day, it could result in wider scale outages, but we work very hard as a business to ensure that our protection systems are in place to isolate those faults to very narrow areas and affect very few customers.
I want to turn to the rate increases, a hot button topic in the country right now. One, what are the factors that led to the Light and Power asking for this rate increase? And with the delays taking place right now, is that causing uncertainty among customers?
So the primary reason, Shane, for applying for rates would have been to deal with the rising costs of providing a safe, reliable service to customers. And that involves making infrastructure upgrades, conducting maintenance on the network, and investing in new technologies that is changing all the time that would allow us to enhance and improve the efficiency of our operation. At this time, as well, as you're probably aware, we are also investing heavily in renewable energy,
Yes.
enabling technologies, so that in order to facilitate the national energy policy transitional goals. And so all of that means that we continue to make very significant investments, and with increasing costs, it means that we would have needed to apply for rates. Now, we don't take, we know that increases in rates or can be burdensome for customers, and so we don't take the decision to apply for rates lightly. In fact, this would be just the third time that we've applied for a rate increase in the last 40 years.
Oh.
And the reason we've been able to spread them out over such long intervals is that before we apply for rates, we make every effort to ensure that we have improved our internal efficiency, look at our costs and our cost controls, look at our productivity. And it's only when we've exhausted all of those opportunities internally in the business, and we have no other recourse, that we would then apply for rates. And so over the last 40 years, up until the point where we actually applied for this last rate increase, our largest block of customers would have seen over that period since 1983 a roughly 8 increase in base rates. However, inflation over that period was in the order of over 250%. Mm-hmm. So that demonstrates the diligence within which we look at our internal processes and are able to manage things the best we can.
From what I'm reading, I'm understanding that the FTC has offered a lower rate increase than what was requested. Why is this not acceptable?
So we had significant challenges with the decision. I mean, maybe start there, and those primarily related to two aspects in particular: the retroactive decisions in relation to decisions that were previously made by the FTC many years in the past, having been changed in this current decision, and that creates quite a bit of uncertainty for us as investors, but not just us, other investors looking to invest in the energy space. And so we sought to highlight those issues and have them addressed in the motion to review and the stay that we filed. Additionally, a second area would be areas of inconsistency between the decision and energy policy, at least from our perspective. And an example of that would be the battery storage. We currently have battery storage in place, and as I would have mentioned in the earlier question, batteries are going to have to play a significant role in our transition to 100% sustainable energy. In the current decision, those batteries were essentially deemed to be imprudent. These are ones that we've installed, not too long ago, back in 2018. And any future batteries, we're requested to do quite a bit of studies to demonstrate the economic benefits of those batteries. However, from an energy policy standpoint, decisions have already been taken in relation to the renewable transition that warrant the need for batteries, and studies have already been conducted that identify the amount of batteries required somewhere in the order of 200 plus megawatts. So we were somewhat perplexed that the 5 megawatts that we already have were deemed imprudent, and seemingly the challenges associated with investing in more. So for those two, there are other factors as well, but those are the two primary ones that would have led us to file the motion to review, to have those issues assessed. And we're quite pleased that recently the FTC would have granted the stay on the decision until those matters are addressed.
Roger, I'm going to be real with you. From the outside looking in, it seems like this may be just about greed for the Light and Power. Mm-hmm. Why can't you, for example, accept the lower rate of increase for now, and then later down the road ask for another one?
Yeah, it's certainly not about greed. It is, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, about being financially enabled to do the things required to provide a safe and reliable service. So, like every other business, every other person in the economy, we would experience the inflationary pressures and the rising costs. And so when we look at what is required to provide the level of service that customers have grown to expect and certainly deserve, we would have identified a gap that needed to be addressed, which we did through the filing for a rate review. Additionally, as I mentioned, those factors related to retroactive decisions as well as misalignment with policy from our perspective, it is critical that those things be addressed so that we can achieve the long-term goals that the country has set for itself in relation to the energy transition that's required. And so it rests very heavily on our ability to meet the goals and targets that we've set by 2030, as well as being able to maintain the levels of service and safe, reliable service that we've been able to provide in the past.
The cost of living has risen significantly over the past decade, we all know it, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. How has Light & Power over the years helped its customers and helped them to mitigate over the rising cost of energy?
So one key area or focus for us has been to manage our own internal costs, because once we do that well, we can defer or delay the frequency with which we need to go back to customers for costs. So we do our best to keep and constrain and hold costs down, which we've done, as I mentioned, well over the last 40 years. But in addition to that, we spend quite a bit of time and effort in public education, sharing information on how to manage energy use. We do that through various channels, whether social media, in the news, or on our website. And we also, as a business, work very closely with our customers, and we've always encouraged customers, if they're having challenges in meeting their commitment or paying their bills, to contact our customer care department, and we work very closely with customers to put plans in place that will allow them to meet the requirements as needed. During COVID, as you would imagine, several customers experienced challenges, and during that time we would have suspended the notices in relation to late payment. We would have, for well over a year, in fact, suspended disconnections for non-payment. And so during that period, we tried to work very closely with our customers, understanding the challenges that were being faced at the time. On top of that, of course, we, as a good corporate citizen, we give to various causes. We've worked closely with the welfare department, for example. We've worked with associations like the Barbados Association of Retired Persons. Again, looking for those areas where there may be vulnerable segments of society, and through our corporate giving program, supporting those very worthy organizations. Or employees as well, beyond what the company does. Our employees also support causes and have been involved, not just during COVID, but on an ongoing basis in supporting many worthy organizations across the country.
Here's a tip for you. Give your appliances enough space to avoid overheating.
Okay, Roger, can you share your thoughts with me on the renewable energy sector, the current status, and how things are progressing?
Certainly. The renewable energy sector has been growing quite rapidly in recent years. If I could share a little bit of the history first, we would have put in place our renewable energy rider, which was a program that facilitated customers interconnecting with the grid back in 2010. And that program has worked extremely well and has grown to the point now where we have just about 80 megawatts of customer-owned renewable energy systems, primarily solar PV, connected to the grid. And that is in addition to the 10 megawatt solar farm that we have at Barbados Light & Power installed at the Trent Power Station in St. Lucie. To put it in perspective, at the end of 2022, we would have had 12%, or just about 12% of our electricity needs met by solar PV, which puts us in the top 10 in the world for countries with solar PV penetration. And we're certainly working very hard to identify ways of incorporating even higher levels of penetration. Where we are today, we're at a key inflection point where we now have to look at additional technologies to incorporate that intermittent renewable energy. Solar PV, wind, technologies like that are intermittent in nature. They come and go with the sun and the wind. And so as you have very high penetration levels of those technologies, it's important to have some means of storing it so that you can smooth out the ups and downs that naturally occur when those technologies are deployed at large scale, as we're doing here. So focus for us now is on that, what is referred to as balance of plant, things like storage, other devices that would allow us to, as we transition from conventional technologies that are dispatchable to technologies that aren't dispatchable and depend on the sun and the wind, to be able to allow those to work whether those resources are available or not. When the sun is not shining, we still need to have the light on when we switch on. And so batteries allow us to do that.
Mm-hmm. So it seems that we're doing a lot. So I want you to specifically speak about the large number of renewable energy systems being added to the grid and how they may be impacting the light and power.
Yeah, so one major impact now that we're at, like I said, about 80 to 90 megawatts of installed capacity, we are seeing the impacts of that on a daily basis as we dispatch generation. So we have system operators that manage the grid. They're monitoring the conditions on an ongoing basis, 24 hours a day, and they're responding to situations that occur. When they see demand going up or solar dropping off the grid, then they have to take certain actions to maintain the balance. Mm-hmm. At this point in time, because of the significant amount that we have, that is becoming more and more challenging. And the way that key way to address that would be to install batteries so that when the sun is at its fullest and those solar systems are generating at maximum, some of it would be put into batteries, and then at night, when the sun goes away and you still need power, you would release the energy from those batteries, and in so doing, you're able to get very high levels of penetration of solar. But that's only possible by increasing the level of energy storage as on the grid itself. Mm-hmm. We also want to mention that I focus heavily on solar and wind, but there are several other renewable technologies, and diversity in technologies is important from a security standpoint. So solar and wind are the ones that, solar in particular, the one that has taken off quite well. However, there's biomass. So that would be using, for example, waste from sugar cane, like bagasse, and using that as a fuel source to boil water and run turbines. There's waste to energy, at least the organic component of waste that has energy content that can be burnt and again used to drive a turbine. Those are renewable technologies that offer the benefit of being dispatchable. You can store that as a fuel source, for example, and you can move up and down the output from those plants depending on the demand. And so deploying that type of renewable technology along with solar and wind does mitigate the amount of battery storage that's required. And that's a good thing because batteries are not cheap. Batteries are in fact very expensive, and as we start to deploy batteries, that is going to put pressure on the price of delivering electricity, and it's that trade-off, that balancing act that's required in terms of moving to a sustainable, 100% sustainable supply versus the cost of doing so, largely driven by things like battery storage. Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing a lot of companies referencing the challenges to do with the supply chain. Is this impacting the light and power as well? And how are you going to manage with the upcoming hurricane season?
Yeah, absolutely. Supply chain has been, starting with COVID and the disruptions that COVID would have created in manufacturing facilities around the world. We started to experience serious issues, and that has not eased up. I mean, the effects of COVID are still being felt. Manufacturers trying to get back up to scale. Some would have challenges, attracting employees back into the business. Beyond that, then we had issues like, global situations like the war in Ukraine that would have impacted the availability of certain key materials that are involved or required in our sector, like transformers, for example, would be a good example. We are seeing significant delays and very, very long lead times in the ability to deliver key components like transformers for our business. What we've sought to do is we're working with several suppliers, so we've increased the portfolio of suppliers and vendors that we would work with so that we have them working in parallel to meet our needs. And that is an ongoing process. So we've expanded the number of vendors that we approach. We've increased our inventory levels. So set triggers that mean that we order earlier than we otherwise would have, taken into consideration the long lead times. And then we work very closely with our own affiliates within the group and other utilities to share experiences and best practices for procurement. But it really is a significant challenge. It's not just the utility that's experiencing that. There are a lot of businesses that are experiencing similar challenges. But for us as an essential service, it's important that we mitigate as best we can to ensure that we continue to provide, that safe, reliable service that customers expect.
Okay. I'd like to end on safety. I'm always amazed when we come here to Light and Power to see the level of attention placed on safety. I mean, from directors, managers, office employees, field employees. The safety is a huge thing with the Light and Power. What are the stats like? And what's the latest in the update in the Light and Power's quest to become world-class safety?
Thanks for that question. The safety is something that we pay particularly close attention to. It's very important to our business. Of course, we work with a product that is hazardous by nature, electricity. And so we take that responsibility very seriously. And we have worked over the years to improve our safety processes. That involves, for example, ensuring that we have procedures and processes in place that begin with a consideration of the safety factors associated with the jobs that are done. So, for example, before critical jobs are undertaken in the business, there's a requirement that we conduct job hazard analyses. The teams would assess the job and identify all of the safety hazards associated with the job and the mitigating measures that will be taken to manage those. So that's one measure that we take. But across the business, we also, in order to ensure we keep safety front of mind, have a number of programs take place during the course of the year. For example, we have safety stand-downs, where we make an effort to stop and think and have a discussion around safety. We would have a requirement that all employees across the business conduct a certain number of safety observations, and those are documented and written up, and any insights or recommendations out of that are logged and tracked to ensure that the actions are taken. So safety for us is real. We live it every day. Our goal is really to ensure and strive for incident-free environment, one in which there are no serious accidents or injuries to employees, and create an environment in which employees leave work in the same condition or better that they arrived.
Yeah. And I must say you're very impressive in that. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Shane.
Energy Talks is broadcast every Tuesday at 7:55 p.m. on CBC TV8. Follow us online at BLPC Online or on our website at blpc.com.bb.
Over 100 years of serving this country. Barbados like a power company. From Christchurch to St. Lucie. Barbados like a power company. You can count on us.